The smartest people in the world have stopped listening to the news, because why would you still trust institutions that no longer have an information advantage over you? My guest on this episode, Fernando Nikolic, argues that this is not just a trend, but the end of the expert mode. Together, we explore why the era of trust the experts and trust the process is over, and why being a Bitcoin practitioner is the only way to survive the coming narrative collapse. And keep on watching to learn what is required to stop outsourcing your thinking and start taking on personal agency today. If you enjoy my content, it would mean a lot to me if you could subscribe to the channel and like my video to support my journey. Thanks a lot. Now let's dive in to this episode. Fernando Nikolic, welcome back again.
Yeah,
Bitcoin from Millennials.
What's up, Bram? I think it's round 3.
This is round 3. Yeah.
So thankful for that, and always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise, man. I think you're a good person to talk to when it comes around media and narratives and how that's evolving in the time that we live in, but also based on the company you're building, your background in music, and also Bitcoin. I think we always have very interesting conversations around how to kind of filter through all the noise that is basically increasing every day. And we kind of connected again on this tweet we both saw of Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz. It said, "My information consumption is now a quarter X, a quarter podcast interviews of the smartest practitioners, a quarter talking to the leading AI model, and a quarter reading old books. The opportunity cost of anything else is far too high and rising daily." And this had 35,000 likes as well, and a lot of different replies and stuff. So if we kind of start there, right? Andreessen suggests that, the news is now a net negative for your own kind of ROI, right? Like what you spent your time on. So the smartest people in the world have stopped listening to legacy media. Do you think the legacy media is now just a tool for managing the decline of the people who aren't paying attention, or would you define this totally differently?
Yeah, I think news, first of all, the term news needs to be changed as well. It just should be olds instead of news, because news are not new anymore. It's more of a post hoc thing where you kind of okay, of something happening on X, for example, and then you might check the news later to get a more of a distilled, more opinionated version of the the actual actions that took place. That's the only real value that I see anymore, to be honest with you. People that are highly smart, very opinionated, and can dissect a lot of different things that are happening at the same time and put that into one article, there's still going to be value for that. But I think those people are going to be probably more and more over time found in Substacks or their own X accounts or just whatever other platform that is more autonomous than some kind of a media outlet with a big logo, big brand umbrella. The branding is kind of the only thing that's left in terms of the legacy media outlets, in terms of relevancy. With everything else, just in terms of what position they play, the credibility that they have, the quality of the actual thing that they put out, they have lost relevancy a long time ago, in my opinion. They have reduced themselves to a fraction of the audience that they used to have, that they used to enjoy for a lot of decades. But you see also the quality is just clickbaity. It's just incredibly cheap junk food media that is being produced for the most part, right? If you take the entire legacy media in one observation, in one big whoop analysis. So now it is just a thing for us to be entertained and be oh man, they are so screwed, and just laugh at their decline. There's definitely a big seismic shift happening, which I think is more of a good analogy is just a dam that breaks, right? You have a big dam containing a lot of water, and there was just the operators of the dam that had control over how much water would actually pass through. And that's the information asymmetry stuff that we were talking about, right? That we're mentioning and essentially basing this whole episode on. It's that you had these gatekeepers that were controlling the dam and were, portioning out the type of information that you were consuming through few controlled distribution channels, right? And over time, we've seen that dam just crack and, water kind of like coming through many different cracks. And for me personally, you mentioned I come from the music industry. It's, the P2P file sharing movement in the early aughts, early 2010s, when I was like working at Universal Music as a product guy. I was like in the middle, I was in the front row of that, seeing how media file sharing happened on a P2P decentralized technology layer like torrents, how that was changing the culture, disrupting the industry, all that good stuff, right? So there's just more and more cracks in this dam, and I think if we haven't already, we are soon going to see the entire dam just collapsing and just the water just, free flowing everywhere. And that's kind of like the shift that we have to think about in terms of how do we handle all of this? Because this is more than just a fire hose. This is a fucking dam that collapses. So how do we handle all that information overload? And I think the Mark Andreessen tweet is a little bit about that, right? Like in this information age where that information asymmetry is dead, how do you handle keeping up on the most important things? Well, you need to curate very aggressively. And I think businesses who are building towards that future are going to be increasingly important over time as more and more people understands like this fragmentation of how we consume information, how we learn new things, how we communicate with other people is increasingly getting more fragmented, and people will feel it in their bones a lot more. I don't think they're doing it right now, but we're talking about maybe the next 12 to 18 months of this dam finally collapsing. So exciting times to be alive.
Do you think this expert class, right, whether it's because of a label, well, it's usually a label from the past, right? Do you think they are about to kind of like experience the same unemployment that travel agents had when Expedia came out or Booking came out, right? Or the music executives, right? Just waking up from the fact that their monopoly was breached and they could fight it like they did, and then they would be told to fuck off by the Pirate Bay guys, right? Is this just a similar thing?
It's interesting because there's some similarities and other dissimilarities. Like I think what you say about truth is also very interesting to me, because yes, I do agree with you that Bitcoin is truth in the sense that you can verify the code, it's transparent, it's open source, it is what it is essentially. But in terms of what is considered or perceived as truth, it's more about achieving a critical mass of believers for a certain ideology or a certain narrative. So it's a volumes game. You need to convince a critical mass of people to believe in something for it to be a truth that has staying power. Or if enough critical mass, it can be institutionalized, right? And the flip side of that, so let's park that thought for 1 second, and then maybe talk about how the time, like the length of time that it takes for an institution that has historically enjoyed the benefits of this information asymmetry. I think the time it takes for them to change is depending on how long of the octopus claws they have been managed to penetrate all kinds of society, right? Because the music business and the movie, like Hollywood and the music business, they had like a lot of mind share. Like they were like carrying cultures, which is very significant. A lot of people get behind cultural things, but institutionalized enough. So for them, they try to fight it maybe, I don't know, 5-6 years with like some kind of a campaigns and some FUD marketing. You wouldn't steal a car, so you wouldn't steal a movie. Remember those ads? So they try, and then they quickly figured out, no, this is unstoppable, and we don't have our tentacles deep
because it's technology, right?
Because it's technology at the end of the day. So they needed to pivot. And they needed to figure out, like, okay, we need to embrace this somehow? And if you look back in history, Spotify got created, which was kind of like a fork of the streaming platforms like LimeWire and Napster and all of that kind of like started. They institutionalized that technology. And when Spotify entered the US market, the big four, Sony, BMG, Universal Music, etc., they were the biggest shareholders of the US entity in Spotify.
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. On-Ramp's multi-institution custody model distributes control access across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 multi-sig quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, just segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while On-Ramp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything that On-Ramp builds. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now On-Ramp is piloting flat, predictable pricing to make best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial products more accessible than ever. Visit onrampbitcoin.com to learn more and sign up with code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. On-Ramp, strength in many, simplicity in one.
In order for Bitcoin to really be adopted widely, way more than it has been now in the first 17 years of existence, you would, it's not entirely false that in order for adoption to grow instantly, more aggressively, the world has to be net negative. It has to be worse, right? Like fiat economy has to accelerate, which will accelerate, destroying the social fabric.
Chaos. Chaos.
For Bitcoin to be adopted quickly as a way of like, you're needy, you're desperate. People who are in the arena that are the closest to benefiting from the system, in this case, people who work in the music business, right? That's one cohort. And then you have everybody that's outside that cohort. And then what's common for both people in this cohort is 2 things. One, the thing that you mentioned, the way that you are wired, the way that you are a certain person who can think critically, who doesn't have a large enough ego to never be changing their mind, but always open and accepting to changing their mind and changing their opinions on things. Well, that's one thing. But the second thing is the information that you consume that will lead you to maybe think critically, right? Like it's a feedback loop. It can be either positive or a very negative feedback loop of like the media and the information that you are letting inside your brain, and then how that wires the way you think and approach things in general. So there's a very interesting combination there because, my background is from Argentina. So you would think, okay, Argentina, chronically defaulter, chronically, mismanaging the money, chronically having major inflationary problems. My family emigrated from Argentina to Norway, where I grew up. I grew up between Norway and Argentina as a direct result of all the chaos that happens from like constant inflationary like dumpster fires. You would think that the entire country of Argentina would understand Bitcoin and adopt it, but that's not the truth. Only a few do. So one is the way that you were wired, but the majority of Argentinians today, they consume a lot of BS, a lot of garbage information, and they subscribe to dangerous ideologies that are extremely centralizing in terms of the state needs to have control over everything, right? And so they don't see a problem with government controlling money. They expect government to control money. They just wish that whoever they vote for in the future will do a better job. That's exactly. That's the only thing. So thinking of like Bitcoin in the sense of like, hey, I was wrong about how this works. I was wrong about trusting these people. I was wrong. And all the stuff that you learned through high school and primary school and what your parents told you, unlearning that, taking that chip off the brain is extremely hard. And that's just, again, the information asymmetry. continuing in a way with all this like fire hose of information that leads people to not really be able to connect to the stuff that matter, because there's just so much noise. So
when you take on that agency and you start thinking for yourself or attempting, right? We now live in an age of a lot of new information, new noise, new synthesis, right? There's 24/7 X feeds, AI, sleepless nights. I'm up until 3 a.m., right? So even though I feel like I'm that person that could discern between that, I think you're pointing in the right direction. It does become harder every day. So maybe this is what you wanted to share, but I do want to ask a question. How can someone actually build a filter that works? Because thinking for yourself is not, I don't know if that's enough, but because then you have to, you have to judge everything that you're consuming. Maybe that's the place where we all should go. But so that was my question. Like, how do you build that filter?
Well, I can't remember if you said it after we pressed record or not, but you told me like something about like all information has already been shared. No ideas is new. Everything is out there, and you just gotta make sense of whatever is out there on your own terms, right? And that's essentially that is going to look like. You need to do some filtering, some outsourcing, some trust, some layers of trust to thought leaders or influencers or X accounts that you just have built trust because you have enjoyed their content over time. And you have to kind of like be on top of your game and do some mixing and matching. And you know, if you follow too many Bitcoin maxis, then you need to maybe take 15 out of your follower list and maybe add 15 new that is about biotech. I don't know, right? But these are decisions that you have to come to yourself. You have to essentially come to a place where you have to say, I'm kind of like in a rabbit hole right now. I'm kind of like in an echo chamber. I need to, diversify my content consumption a little bit. But getting to that point, I don't think a great majority is going to do that. I'm sorry to be maybe too black-pilled in this way of thinking, but the majority of people, they watch stupid shit anyways. They're not going to all the time try to seek out excellence in terms of motivation, in terms of goals, life goals, or in terms of, hey, projects I can start or new technologies that I can embrace. That's like, I don't know if saying 5% of the total population is even too generous, to be honest, maybe 1%. And then the rest of the 99 are going to be too caught up with life, because we live in a accelerationist fiat monetary world where making money is increasingly difficult through ordinary means. The lousy, very low salary that you get on average is worth less and less. You can buy less and less things for the same salary. So what do? You can't listen to 3-hour Joe Rogan podcasts. You can't read Lindy books like Mark Andreessen does. People are just going to be too caught up just living life because their brain doesn't really go further out. And sorry to be so cynical, but like, I come from a country where like the financial literacy is at the bottom. So all these like projections that Bitcoiners from the West has, for example, just to give you one example of like, adoption should be huge in El Salvador because, poor people, they're poor. They need to get rich. Being from a place where things are messed up doesn't give you a lot of time to dwell deep into a very complex topic like, for example, Bitcoin. And if you take a look at the majority of Bitcoiners today and you ask them about their like orange pilling journey or whatever, majority of people are going to say, I disregarded Bitcoin the first time I heard about it. Took me years to really understand it. And these are people from the West who have a more, sedentary lifestyle.
Well, it's funny because I used to think that it was quite an achievement to figure out Bitcoin while not really experiencing the problem that it solves, right? So if you live in a Western country and although the money is losing value, it still works, then I don't really have a reason, like the people that you just described. So I thought for a long time, like, oh, it's actually quite an achievement that I figured this out, while not experiencing the problem, right? Because I think the classical thinking would be, also when people are building companies or startups or whatever, you try to identify the customer segment that has the problem, but also is aware of the problem, but is also open to solving it, and is open to spending a certain amount of money on that solution that actually would make your idea a business, right? So that's five things already. And I once talked to a guy, I forgot his name. He listens to the podcast, and I met him in real life, and he was from Kenya, and like super into Bitcoin. And I think like 2 years ago or something, there were like huge protests in Kenya against the government, and there's this whole plan for CBDC or whatever, like. And there's all these young people that are revolting against the government, which was great, right? And he wanted to support the young people and say, like, you should stop feeding the system, stop using their money. Like, you have to get into Bitcoin. Like, everything that you have identified as being wrong is correct, and you can solve it by all adopting Bitcoin. Just leave the money, right? And they all thought he was crazy. So these are people that knew there was something fishy going on. There is a problem. They wanted to do something about it, right? They went onto the street and they demanded like a regime change and all these things. But they are still stuck in the same system that created their problem.
Yeah, which is so fascinating.
Right? Yeah. So
fascinating. Like young people today too, like there's so much ideology that is being spread across social media that is the first thing that like teaches you anything. Like, and ironically, sarcastically saying. So if you, for example, went to somebody who's like extreme, I don't know, far left, in terms of political ideology, and they're like anti everything, they want equality, they want to opt out, and then you tell them about Bitcoin, and the first thing that they might say is like, no, that's a far right thing, I don't like it. It's like, dude, your ideology is stopping you in the tracks of actually taking that step to understand like it's a neutral thing. Bitcoin is neutral. But yeah, so again, it's
funny, by the way, because Bitcoin, the technology is neutral, right? I mean, I say the same thing, but there's people that say, no. The whole concept of Bitcoin is not a leftist concept, right? So technology-wise, it's neutral. But for example, giving more agency to individuals, having more freedom, having an actual free market based on merit, those are not really ideas that align with more like leftist, collective, communist thinking.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Just the sheer thought that the sheer action of separating money and state is not a neutral action, right? So yeah, the technology is neutral, but the actual thing, it's pretty political. But so if you are like a super, you want everything centralized, you want the state to govern and make the decisions for you, you're not going to like it. So there's a lot of hurdles that I think can be traced back to like ideology, the information that you consume, the way that you educate yourself online. That is a bigger hurdle than you would actually think, because you would think, oh, this free flowing of information is great for Bitcoin because everybody can access the truth about Bitcoin. I don't know if you read Rene Girard or anything like that, but he has this like the mimetic theory, like we make decisions with the biggest motivation, knowing that we have a crowd behind us that can kind of like, defend us, even if like we are
validate
wrong. Yeah, they validate you. And if you hear anything from the outside of your core group that says otherwise, then that's actual more validation that you are right, because these idiots that are not part of your group are disagreeing with you. That makes you even more right. Does that make sense? So that's like the thing where Bitcoin, because of its nature, will only appeal to people who want to take agency, who want to be self-sovereign, who want to be free, who wants to be able to transmit value in a free way, and not have a third party being able to like, oh, you're not allowed, or you are allowed to transmit value.
Or to think that. That.
So, but that is communism in a nutshell. They are the sole. That's the information asymmetry. They are the sole bearers of truth. Like the church back in the day, before it got separated by the state, the church was we have the connection to God. If you want access to God, you got to go through us. You can't do it. And then Martin Luther came and said, no. You can have direct access to God if you want. And that's the whole basis of Protestant views. And you gotta,
what a crazy idea.
But he was inside the Catholic Church, and like the way that he got like radicalized to invent the Protestant view was from spending enough time inside the Catholic Church in Rome and saying, man, these people are fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And he wanted to change it from the inside, and he was like, no, let me just create a parallel system and then start from scratch and then amass enough people. And he did. And that's why it survived, because the length of, the survival is depending on how much critical mass you apply. So I think Bitcoiners today, we should think about, there's no global domination that's going to happen. We have everything, in the tech, in the code, in the protocol to be a global reserve asset. But that doesn't mean that it's a guarantee that we will end up being a global reserve asset. We will have a big enough, network state, to take a Balaji concept, to be able to transact freely between the people who want to opt into that. And that's great. That is enough. And we can only hope to grow that pot bigger. But in terms of like hyper Bitcoinization is going to take over the world, it's going to kill fiat, it's going to replace USD. At least not in our lifetime, never. But I think also it's never going to happen anyway, because of just this inherent values that Bitcoin has, that is the antithesis of the people who just love group thinking, consolidation, and centralizing everything. It's just like, it's two very deep human parts of human nature that will never really go away.
I'm thinking about how do we place that in the time right now, right?
Yeah.
So why is Bitcoin even happening? Why does it attract a certain type of people that are kind of distancing themselves from this centralized control because they're seeing that it's not working for them, while at the same time, like we're talking about, there's people that are absolutely in favor of centralized control, and we might have a lot of opinions about these people, but those are kind of irrelevant, right? We act from a certain truth that we see, and they do the same, so that's kind of irrelevant.
I think you're right. It's kind of like the main is the core thing that we need to talk about all the time as Bitcoiners, I think, because times change, and we need to always think, how does Bitcoin fit in the current environment or the current time or current phase life cycle that we're in terms of history. And we should never let the foot off that gas, because I think times change way quicker than Bitcoin changes. So if everything else is moving in a high speed and Bitcoin is this like slow moving train, then will there be times where Bitcoin doesn't fit at all, because just everything is so advanced and Bitcoin is so primitive in comparison? The primitive of that might be a strength. I ultimately think it is a strength, because in chaos you need light. But will people recognize light when they're used to noise? So sorry, it's a very philosophical question here, but I think the way that you put it, right, just by breaking it down into good versus bad, I think is true. And I think you're also right when you say, well, people need to know that bad things exist. But like, no, you said bad things needs to exist for good to coexist. And I say yes, but I also want to add another layer to that, is that people need to know that bad stuff exists and what good stuff exists. And they need to know that this is good and this is bad. Because a lot of people, in what I think is bad, a lot of people look at the exact same thing.
Yes.
This is a good thing. Yes. So, the way that I see it is...
that's why change never stops, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And information kind of like follows that. So information always change. Formats, mediums always change. You will see like, oh, this Bitcoin, god that you looked up to, that orange pilled you back in 2017. All of a sudden you had to kill him because he changed, or he started getting other ideas. So all of these things fluctuate all the time. And what I'm interested in is, now that the dam is, cracking and exploding, and we have a 100x fire hose aimed at us in terms of information. How do we distill these things? How do we know what is good, what is bad? How do we know something is correct or wrong?
For my European friends that want to buy Bitcoin with ease, check out Relay. I've been a long-time fan and happy to partner up with what I think is the best Bitcoin-only platform for Europeans. They offer a super simple, beginner-friendly app with no distractions and no shitcoins. You can do a quick one-time smash buy or set up automatic purchases when you're stacking regularly. And here's the thing that matters most. Relay is 100% self-custody. Every set you hold is yours. Your keys, your coins. If you want to get started, download the app via my link below or in the description and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, at checkout to get 10% off your fees. A huge shout out to Relay for sponsoring the show. Now let's continue.
We talk about incentives a lot in Bitcoin, right? And you always say, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. So there's a lot of incentives that is in play when it comes to information, right? Because you have thought leaders, you have platforms, you have outlets. All of them are in the business of making money based on their content. We have a lot of reporters, journalists, outlets, individual podcasters like yourself. You create content and you create media and you distribute that in order to get more views and get more people excited about what you're talking about. And in order for you to actually amass an audience, you can't talk about anything that you like. You need to focus down and niche down on very specific things. So you chose Bitcoin, for example. So you have a Bitcoin podcast. Now, once you do this for a lot of years and you have amassed a great audience, a following on social media, etc., can you tomorrow say, I was wrong about Bitcoin, I've changed my mind? You can, but you're going to lose that audience and you got to figure out what to do. So you take that example, and this is with everyone. Everybody extrapolated into what is the media landscape is all going to be more and more extreme because one, you got to niche down in order to establish an audience. And then you have to kind of be, extreme. You got to be very one-sided because you got to feed into that audience and grow that audience that you established. So I think what I'm trying to say is if every single content creator or media outlet is a node and you have all these nodes that creates this decentralized media fragmentation landscape, the people who are on the other side as consumers of that content are going to attach themselves to you, to maybe 4 or 5 other people, like Mark Andreessen says he's doing. And then that's going to be like the thing that consumer of content is going to have as a daily content diet, the content consumption. So I think 2 things. This extreme, very one-sided niche content production is going to make it very easy for people to understand Bitcoin from a very specific perspective. Like, I don't think the next generation of Bitcoiners who will come in through content are going to understand everything from cryptography to running a node to the ETFs and the monetary properties. But they're going to come through one of these things, right? They're going to only know Bitcoin because of the ETF or only know Bitcoin because of the monetary properties. And that's going to be their truth and that their conviction of why Bitcoin matters. But that's going to be, potentially very anti the cypherpunk ethos, and I think that is kind of like how adoption will look like. To answer your question, it's going to be a fragmented mess of people who are like extreme at very one thing because there's so much information, so much noise. You can only deeply understand one thing at a time. And then that might create some internal conflict because there might be a lot of Bitcoiners who thinks, being a Bitcoiner means you got to check all these boxes and you only check 1 or 2, so you're not a real Bitcoiner. So that's going to be a little bit like a rough coexistence, I think. But I think is going to be the adoption moving forward. It's going to grow, but it's going to grow in small cohorts within the Bitcoin cohort, and then kind of like evolve from kind of like very contradictory viewpoints as well. But I think it's good. I think we need different voices in Bitcoin. We need people who believe in different things, but essentially believe in one thing, in this case, Bitcoin, that can, fight it out and, discuss and debate. And I think you take that as one example, being Bitcoin one example, and then you take that with everything in the world, with food, with medicine, with religion, etc.
Yeah, I really like that, and I will share what my plan is. I wanted to tell you after the recording, but we can do that on the recording, and also for the people listening, anyone who made it this far in the episode, let me know what you think of this. But I agree with what you're saying, and it's also something that I want to avoid, because what you said, Bitcoin for me has become the anchor that shows me there is a certain truth possible, right? Like literally, technological, informational truth, which kind of taught me that if we can create, once you have that in a world that becomes more and more chaotic, it actually really helps, at least me, myself, right, to navigate this increasingly chaotic world that I'm also actively participating in, because that is something that I personally enjoy, because that is how I think I can learn the most, and therefore also adapt in the best way possible to this ever-changing environment, basically. And for me, Bitcoin was only the start to go even further with that. So although I've been focused on Bitcoin, obviously, almost 250 episodes, I'm going to change it up and go from Bitcoin for Millennials to Freedom for Millennials, with kind of like the subtitle being, waking up to money, mind, and meaning. Because Bitcoin for me is only the start, and it's a deep rabbit hole, right? That gives you a lot of different avenues that you could go down to. For me, this philosophical and spiritual part is really has really appealed to me as someone who would have described himself as like extreme agnostic person, like 5 years ago or something like that, right? And it put me on a path that is bringing me a lot of value and new, kind of like renewed curiosity, and kind of like this beginner's mind type feeling that I've discovered is actually what motivates me, right? So although I know a lot about Bitcoin, and I also think, you can put me on a table with any, TradFi critic or whatever, I think I'm very comfortable doing that. I'm less comfortable exploring more spiritual stuff, right? Or philosophical stuff or whatever. And but in a good way, in a student type of way. So this kind of like pivot, or I see it more as an evolution. The idea behind it is kind of put myself back in this beginner's mindset, curious type of seat, which also opens up a broader audience, I would say, where eventually, by some way, shape, or form, Bitcoin always comes back. Because for me personally, that is the anchor, right? That's the ruler or the measurement tape or whatever that you can put next to any fucking bullshit from the fiat world and use it to explain that is noise. Yeah. And by finding a certain anchor or accepting something as a truth, you can realign yourself towards this chaos, but you are aligned. Does that make sense? So awesome. That is something I want to explore. Like, I want to be the subject of the podcast myself, and that's how I want to feel. Yeah,
I love that, and congrats, by the way. I think that's a great next step in terms of evolution and growth for you individually, but also for your for your project, for your business. I think kind of like you've seen other examples too. Peter McCormack being a very good example of that too. And I spoke to tweeted with there's the head of multimedia at The Block, who used to be at Cointelegraph for a while, called Gareth Jenkinson. Through him, he tweeted something, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And he was talking about like post-maximalism, which is in the context of his tweet was more of a, you think that Bitcoin is the best crypto, but you still understand why other people want to, use other cryptos for other things. That's not exactly where I'm at, but I like the post-maximalism term, because it's like Bitcoin opens, when you really go deep, it opens you to so much more. And that thing that we talked about in the beginning of the pod, where it's like, you understand, you come to this critical inflection point in your life where you're like, I got to unlearn a lot of things. I got to kick off some bad habits. I got to not consume in terms of content, but also materialistic in a sense. We got to stop consuming certain things. You start to see the world differently through a different lens. It's super enriching. But I think once you have activated that lens and you see everything with that lens, you start to see other stuff that is interesting as well. You also want to explore. And I think that is so crucial, because I think in that way, Bitcoin can achieve true adoption in the sense of Bitcoin becoming just one thing in your toolbox that you use for a self-sovereign life, for more illuminated existence, instead of, Bitcoin is my only identity, is the only thing I care about, right? It becomes not second place, but it's part of the...
No, it's fundamental to it. For me, it's fundamental. Without Bitcoin, I wouldn't even be able to explore these other things that also give me value, right? So I do think Bitcoin is that centerpiece, so to say, that helped me ground and align myself in a certain way that is beneficial for my life and my progression. So I don't agree with the less maximalism, actually, because Bitcoin should be defended at any cost, because it is this really, in this really crazy, weird way, it is an engineered foundation of truth, right? And I just always put that back to when you verify Bitcoin right now, and I do it right now, we see the exact same subjective or objective thing. That's mind-blowing. That's non-existent in this current world, and definitely not in a world that's coming, right? So if you can view it as a tool to center yourself or align yourself in this ever-increasing chaotic world, that's when you can also look and try to figure out, okay, what do I want to pay attention to? For me, it's this spiritual and philosophical path, right? For other people, it's other things, and that is totally fine. But yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of like this life after Bitcoin thing. Okay, you figured Bitcoin out, but then what, right? Okay, yes, I think everyone should be toxic maxi to defend Bitcoin, but I mean, I still hope to live a lot of years. What am I going to do? How am I going to progress and stuff like that? So
it's like graduating from the best school ever, and then you kind of you're equipped. You have so many tools in your mind.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Yeah, that's good.
And also, but the internet and this free flowing of information is also a very interesting time to be alive in, and also using AI to do deep research and get there faster and accelerate the process of finding that information that is valuable to you is quite an interesting inflection point, because there's
a tool. It's a tool.
But to give you one example, and I don't know if this is a bad habit or not, but I think this is possible, and I think it's good that it's possible, but it could potentially be very damaging, because you are now able to enter any rabbit hole that you want. For example, yesterday, I don't know about you, man, but I have discovered ducks. I think ducks are fascinating animals. Okay, I saw. Okay. We have a pool here, and I see we're in an Airbnb here, and every day there's 2-3 ducks that come. They fly from somewhere and they land on the pool, and they just hang out by the pool. And I look at them, and they're fucking fascinating. And I'm like, let me go on YouTube and just see a documentary about ducks, right? Then I found
what do you know about ducks? Right?
I had no idea. I just
me neither.
Let me see. And then 5 minutes into the documentary that I found just by doing a search, I was like, okay, I know already now I can dedicate 6 months of my life and get so much information about ducks if I wanted to. I don't know if I want to do that, but the possibility is always there. The option is always there to go so deep into any topic that, hey, man, coming from the Bitcoin world and having gone into such deep rabbit holes from 2017, from my personal experience, and having met so many insanely smart people and having access to so much great content, has really equipped me for like, hey, if I want to become a PhD in like the life of ducks, I can, and for that, with numerology and spirituality, I think it's amazing. It's such an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah. Well, again, we didn't prep this, but this is a setup for one of the two last questions I want to ask you. When you think about the future for the kids, right? Like I'm thinking about that a lot. Like, okay, what does that look like, right? What is school? What is a study? What is education? If you can find all this information, like you said, if you can go down any rabbit hole that you find interesting, right? I mean, I'm trying it with my kids. Like anything they find interesting, I'm saying like, okay, go. I'll pay for you to try it out or whatever. Like whether it's a sport or something, but also the digital or information part. Like, okay, please just try it out. Like because what you just described, that kind of skill, I don't know, it's a skill. I also think it's partially personality trait, to be honest, but we discussed that. But it's definitely also a skill, right? You need to learn how to synthesize and filter and discern and reflect on information, and then slowly determine if this should be part of your ideology or way you look at the world, right? Your paradigm matrix, whatever. That by itself is a crazy skill, I would say, and a skill that never stops developing, because you're going to be wrong at some point, and you're going to be confronted with the fact that you're wrong, and then you're going to think like, oh, I wasted, I don't know, 10 years of my life thinking this was true. Yeah, like how would you rebuild education for kids? Like if you couldn't use any legacy stuff, how would you teach them to navigate the world where, the experts with labels, right, that we talked about, they're kind of replaced by, I would say, the call for agency. Like you need to be able to do it, or you will become a serf or whatever to anyone's algorithm, basically.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Because that's the thing, right? Like you have the ability to learn about, I don't know, Socrates, or you might get caught. Your kid can learn about that, or your kid can get caught up in some weird algorithm that after 3 months, your kid thinks that they're a woman instead of a man, right? Or whatever other thing. So it's about not falling into the traps more than going in the right things, because the right things can be so many different things. But I think it's easier, at least for me, to say, I know that this is bad, but I can't tell you what is good. You got to find out for yourself. You got to you just got to find that out for yourself. But I can tell you what is not good. And, but I think it's a very powerful tool, the internet and laptops and devices. And I think if you take a look at how the public schools are using it, they're not using it for how awesome it. I saw one teacher. Actually, I saw a tweet yesterday. There was a guy who was explaining the Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution through playing Assassin's Creed. I think that's cool. It's a cool way, you got to learn. You got to see how your kids today process information, what format they pay attention to, and then kind of like Trojan horse it through that way. So maybe that is the way, but I really have a hard time really understanding why you would have a monologue to a room of 20, 30 people at the same time and expecting everyone to soak up the knowledge in the exact same way. I think school is just another institution that is just going to be disintegrated. And I think they are kind of like in the same position that the music business was 20, 25 years ago, where they're like, okay, we got to either embrace the technology and change the way we do things, or we just disappear into irrelevance. And I don't know where the actual institution, like the monolith of education is. I know everything that's public have always sucked anyway. So I think it's more on the private route. And I think maybe the parents should be more on top of, taking more responsibility of the education of the kid and not outsourcing it to the teachers and the school system.
Yeah. Yeah. You gave me an extra argument, I would say, for the podcast evolution, because I think the spiritual and philosophical part will probably become, in my view, more and more important to give to your kids, right? Yes. That there is a a certain truth that emanates from within you that exists independent of whatever the noise is outside of your head, right? Whatever you're hearing or reading. That is again, that's why Bitcoin is so spiritual for me. Like, if that is that anchor, right? Like, Bitcoin for me is the technological anchor to get to a spiritual anchor, right? Like, that was my arc. But I also, that's why I want to talk about it more. But I think
in terms of what, like, in terms of, like,
well, like, if sorry.
In terms of, like, Bitcoin is immutable, and then you have like legacy stuff that has survived millennia.
Yeah. So it's an absolute truth, right? Like, Bitcoin is an absolute objective truth. Like I said, if you verify it now and I verify it now, we see the exact same thing. There's nothing like that in this world. Nothing, right? So if Bitcoin can do that in a technological data way, and anchor in the sense of it helps me stay in place in this infinite information chaos that is only going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. I've read, if people go to my X account, I see some articles around that. Like, I have a trilogy of articles around, everything is going to be infinitely copied, all the information except Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right. So Bitcoin is in that sense a light in the infinite chaotic darkness. But if you translate,
we got 39 million shitcoins, right? We got so many forks of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it's obvious. Yeah.
But if you translate that to, I think also what we talked about, right? Like, you have a certain personality, you're wired in a certain way. There's stuff I think you can definitely change. There's stuff you cannot change, and you probably should align with in order to also have a better life experience. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that, there's a similar mechanism that you can apply in this spiritual and philosophical realm as what I've just described is what Bitcoin is doing, and that's why I think there's so much more after Bitcoin, right? And it is also why in August I'm organizing a psychedelic retreat. It's called Going Beyond Bitcoin, for example, right? And the idea is that we kind of like share this idea that I'm just talking about, and try to see, okay, what does that look like? Like, how do I want to live? What's the wisdom I can receive and then apply, and with an open mind and an attitude of just forever inevitable change. And I think in that way you also kind of stay adaptable. I don't want to say lean, but to whatever the change is that is coming. But the fun realization is that becoming adaptable starts with anchoring yourself somewhere.
Totally. That's exactly right. I think it's a concept that I really am interested in. That I'm not like, I'm still in the process of like understanding it. So I might be very brutish right now, but. This concept of the curated graph, right, where you have a lot of centerpieces that connects to a lot of different things, but like the two extremes, they don't connect to each other, but you find there's like a 2-3 hops in between, and the sum of that is what makes you unique, original, critical thinker, you name it. But you're essentially taking a lot of things that have a max of 3-4 hops of distance between each other, all connected in a weird way that only you can make sense of. But in the center, there's always like 2-3 bigger graphs, and then the more hops you have, the thinner they get.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like the way to go about knowledge and curation and lifestyle choices, and where you choose to live, who you choose to grow, to marry, stuff like that. All these decisions are a byproduct of that like knowledge graph that you carry, that is consisting of your software and your hardware, essentially, right? There's like certain when being a human that has existed for millennia that you cannot erase, and then there's a lot of other stuff that you can plug in and out, which is like a layer, an extra layer 2, but then you can't mess up the base layer, essentially. So it's always it's always that. And I think that's a very dynamic, very pragmatic, like it's like an organism that changes, replaces things all the time. And as long as the thing that you replace something with still makes sense for the entirety of the graph, then you can just continue life always stacking knowledge, but also having like a retroactive view that always makes sense, you know, so you can look back in your life 20, 30 years from now, like, okay, yeah, I can see that there's a, you know, line across everything, you know, even though in the moment it felt very weird and strange. It was a very logical, natural next step because of everything else that I've been through. So yeah, I love this.
I love that. That's great. That's great. Is there anything you think we didn't cover, or something you would want to highlight, or whatever? Anything that that you still want to share?
I mean, the reason why I built perception is I kind of like got tired of being surprised by things that I should have seen coming. And like the information exists, everything is out there, but it's just scattered around so many sources and channels and people and conferences and podcasts and newsletters that nobody's connecting it. And I think I kind of touched upon it. Maybe we can just have like one final closing statement, which like, if you want to survive in the next 5 years, if you want to enter 2030 being equipped with something that will make you money, that will not drive you crazy, that will not put you in a permanent underclass, and actually keep learning and keep growing as a human being, I think you need to be able to master the art of extreme curation, extreme selection, but then balance that with extreme curiosity and with that kind of like the knack of always wanting to explore new things. And you can use certain tools, or you can do it manually, or you can just like selectively opt out of the internet as a whole and just like build yourself a library and read a book, and then you read whatever other book that author has written, and then you kind of create a blockchain of, you know, books and literature that you stack. I mean, whatever method you want, choose whatever you want. But I think everybody needs to make a decision in terms of, do you want to be a passive consumer or a worker? Or do you want to be an active builder that focuses on building new things and achieving new things and learning new things? And I think the information is out there for everyone, but you got to learn that knack of like natural curation and doing content diets and really having that balance. And it's going to be extremely hard because the algorithm is against you. The media outlets is against you. Influencers are against you. They only think of their own interests. So who is going to take care of you? You. And that's it, man. I wish everybody good luck. It's going to be an increasingly interesting time to be alive, and I think there's a lot of opportunity, but I think a lot of people are going to suffer if they don't employ these tactics quickly. And that's it. That's the final banger to close out the
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. I hope people found it valuable. And yeah, let's stay in touch. I'm excited to see where all of this goes, man. Cheers. Thank you.
For having me on, man. Thank you.
Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode. Bye.